Hello, Malcolm here, and thank you for watching the video or listening to the podcast of the Watford Church of Christ. We're currently preaching and teaching through our 5 church aspirations, as we call them, to be God-focused, to be relationship-based, to enable our children to become Christians, to be always free but spiritual, and fifthly, to toil to build the church well. And those spell great. We want to be a great church to God's glory. So we're beginning 2018 by focusing on these, preparing our hearts and minds to be ready for the year ahead. If you've got any thoughts on any of these topics, then please leave a comment, contact us via the Facebook page, the website, the Twitter feed and so on. We hope you enjoy what you're about to see and hear.
Amen. So first of all, I have a question for you. What are your children like? What are children like, if I can ask the congregation? They're like angels. They're like angels. All the time? Sometimes like angels.
There's enthusiasm that's not learned.
Enthusiasm, natural.
That comes from deep down.
Yes.
Authenticity.
They're authentic, all different. Penny.
There is individual as adults.
There's an individual as adults, yeah. Lively. Are they hungry?
Yes.
All the time. They never stop being hungry.
My child is never hungry.
I don't think. It looks like she's had all the pies. Yeah, and as they grow older, they have different traits. Infants different to teens, different, challenging. You know, we were once. It's hard to believe. We were once all children. Yes, even Malcolm was once a child. And we all had a childhood. Now, that could have been a positive thing. It might have been a negative thing, or a bit of both. But as I teach today, I want us to be mindful that we were once children. I want to be mindful of what our parents were like with us. I've got a question. What are some of the things that made your childhood a good experience? What are the things you're fond of, if I can ask around?
My siblings, actually.
Your siblings? Yeah?
The time of siblings.
Do you remember good times spent with your sister? Yeah?
Actually, it got me always into trouble.
Any other good experiences we can remember with our family, parents?
Family holidays.
Family holidays. Yeah. Anybody else? Go on.
I remember good memories of my mum just telling us stories, just to make them up. Just tell us.
Make them up. Wow.
It was lovely.
Oh, that's sweet.
Interesting as a parental role, although I'm a great-grandfather, in my present role I have to be a father,
Yep.
which is difficult because that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So it's not really grandfathering, it's
Fathering. Yeah. And as we get older, we can forget what we're like as children, right? I can forget.
No idea.
Becky, what was you going to say?
I was just going to say, I think my parents worked well as a team, and I think they worked well at creating a close family unit that's still close now, even beyond childhood.
Yeah. You know, some of us may have had bad experiences as children. I don't know if it's probably appropriate to share them right now in the congregation, but some of us do. And it's mindful we need to be mindful of that as we carry into our parenting, that, you know, that could help us and that can maybe not help us, if that makes sense. My childhood was a great childhood. I remember I was lucky enough to be born in a cul-de-sac in this new estate, and then basically our back garden overlooked into this brook and this massive farmer's field where the grass was that tall. She used to play army and tend. We used to always be outdoors. I was very, very fond of my childhood. Just be able to play outdoors and run free and things. It's something what I think is really important for children. You know, we may even carry on family traditions that made us happy. It makes us feel good as we remember the fond times that we had, and we want to make them fond times with our own family, so we carry them forward. You know, Becky was sharing with us this morning that we have a tradition that it's someone's birthday in our family, they get to choose the takeaway. So it's KFC or whatever. We have a takeaway together as a family. Yeah, and she was also sharing that when she was younger, they used to all get up really early in the morning on someone's birthday and do presents and sing. Which I've come to adjust to that, getting up really early in the morning. But it's not a tradition that we had. We had to wait till after school to open our presents. So it's the kind of tradition I've had to be involved in very enthusiastically. Half asleep singing happy birthday. But the kids love it. The kids love coming downstairs, their birthday. Even when they're teenagers, they love it. You can't to take that family tradition away now would be awful.
I used to, I still do, put footprints of talcum powder at Christmas for the mince pie. But 2 or 3 years ago, my son, who's now 28, I forgot to do it, and he came down. He said, "Where are the footprints?" It's 28.
Wow.
Isn't it funny how we take them things away and they get upset because we're so used to them? Yeah. And does he do it with these kids?
Yeah.
Does he do it with these kids one day?
Oh, he won't have kids.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's a computer geek.
It's a computer gig. So, warning. This is not a parenting class. This is about enabling our children to become Christians as a church. But before we do that and come to start talking about what we can do as a church, it's good for us to identify our parental role at home in our family lives. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about the church role and understand the difference of the stages that as children grow, we do different things and potential pitfalls we can maybe fall into. And to be aware of a child's abilities at different ages, I think, is important as they go through the transition of different stages in life. But I want to have a bit of a discussion and split them into 2 or 3 groups of different ages and really try and figure out what we can do to inspire our children to become Christians. Then come together and talk about it. And any new suggestions. Then talk about at the end just about what kind of culture we want to try and create in the church to build that platform, that culture to make it easier for our children to one day say, yes, I want to make Jesus the Lord of my lives. We all take parenting with a slightly different view. And we tackle it with what we've learned and experienced in our own childhood, our cultural background. But the Bible and God's standard should always be the authority over our culture or what our parents taught us. Some may be in line, and some may not be in line. We realise that in order to help our children become Christians one day, our example and demonstrating a healthy Christian life is a massive factor. Not sure about you guys, but this can feel like a massive burden and create a fear in us and a guilt in us that we can never shake off as you walk around feeling like hypocrites. Because our children see the good, the bad, and the ugly of us as sinners. And we can feel like we're altering their course or their destiny. We're altering their path as we wrong them or sin. God has given us the responsibility to raise our children. That responsibility does not belong to the school that they attend or the church they attend. It's the school's job to educate on our behalf, as well as the education they receive through family life and parenting. And it's the church's responsibility for our children to be brought up in a healthy, godly environment. It's the church's responsibility to help, enable, and inspire our kids and anybody else's kids one day to become followers of Jesus. And despite of how much we feel about our kids from time to time, children are a blessing. In Psalms it says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, and the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, the children are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with the enemies in the gate." Children are a blessing. And then this scripture here really highlights how much we mean to him individually, the lengths he goes to. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of that one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. So it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. That should be our heart as a church. That should be our heart for our children. That not one of them will perish. Everybody will find the right path. And that we'll do everything capable in our power to help people to find God. Basically, we're on a rescue mission. From the very start, when they're born, we're on a rescue mission. Alright. So, enabling versus helping. Is there a difference? What is the difference? Is it the same? It sounds simple, but actually there is a slight difference. So helping is doing something for someone else that they are not capable of doing for themselves. And enabling gives someone the means and authority to be able to do something to make possible. And I made a point there, I'll talk about in a minute, we can be too helpful. So, when do we help? When do we enable? You know, one of the things what we can fall into the trap of is that we think suffering is bad. So we overprotect our children. Which stops our children from learning important lessons in life, growing and becoming resilient. Understanding the pattern of asking forgiveness and being forgiven. If they don't experience it, they will not know how to demonstrate it. So an example of that is especially for younger children. They do something wrong and then we ignore it. And they don't learn the right way to be told off, be forgiven and move on. And receive that forgiveness, that repentance and then that moving on. If they don't experience that from a young age, they won't really show it in their lives, in their friendships. So it's really important that they understand that pattern of forgiveness and being forgiven. In Romans 5, verse 3 to 4, it says, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. One of the other pitfalls we might fall into is that we like the feeling of control. In a weird kind of sense, we allow our children to become codependent, so we maintain control over the child. Now, this is true of teens. Perhaps we over-control because we're fearful of certain outcomes. We're fearful that if we give them too much rein, they're not going to make the right choice. They're going to get themselves into a mess, and then we've got to deal with that strife when it comes our way. And with the little ones, we don't control enough. Because if we say no to the child who's little, we've then got to deal with this child for having a disgruntled child, and we want to maintain a peace. We don't want to have any drama. But actually, we're setting ourselves up for a fall. So at different stages in life, as the children are old or young, there's different shepherding what needs to go on. And I think we need to be mindful of that as parents. In Proverbs 22:15 it says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. Now, one of my favourite movies as a child was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I loved that movie. When the Oompa Loompas talk about good children and bad children. What do you get when your kid is a brat? And I remember going to my grandma's. She had it on video. And every time I went to her grandma's, I watched that video over and over and over again. But it had an impact on me. I didn't want to be a nasty child or the bad egg. I wanted to be the good child. I wanted to be Charlie. I wanted to win the reward. You know, can't we all relate to that? I want to win the reward. As our children get older and become teens, do we allow God to work? We don't like the idea of dealing with the strife that a trusting attitude can bring. It's really important to deal with these things before they experience them in the world. And me and my wife were chatting about this. It's kind of like, if we deal with the consequences when they're in our home, in the safety of our home, rather than not letting them, if we deal with them in the world, it can be much worse, if that makes sense. So it is really good to let our children make mistakes while they are with us, so they can learn them lessons while they are with us in the home, because one day they will not be at home. When you intervene too much and not allow them to suffer the consequences of their actions, you're limiting how much God can work in that situation. In Galatians 6 it says, "Don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant." Allowing another to suffer those consequences is in effect partnering with God. How often do I think like that as a parent? That if I allow my child to suffer the consequences of his actions, I'm partnering with God. But actually that's biblical. The justice of God is better than my justice. And if he learns it God's ways and learns a good lesson out of it, it's better than trying to learn it from me. Also, comfortable people have zero motivation to change their behaviour. If we allow our children to become too dependent, if we help too much, do they become too comfortable and lazy? Do they have to learn from their own mistakes? In Hebrews 12 it says, "No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way." Showing people how to train themselves is a philosophy you can carry with you everywhere in life. And not just for your children and teenagers, but for everyone. Simply giving without requiring accountability is irresponsible. We need to develop discernment in how to know how to shepherd our children. So when we're helping too much, we can actually prevent a lack of growth. One thing I think is great, what Dawn's been doing with the preteens, is that she's allowed the teens to develop their own curriculum. She's given them ownership as to what they want to learn. So she's gone with the preteens, we've got together and okay, what do you want to learn? Let's make it yours. That's a great way of helping children to develop their own conviction about wanting to learn about God. It's not something that's dictated or turned, but it makes it theirs. It makes it more exciting. And it gives them an ownership and a responsibility for their own spiritual state. Am I on the right? In a minute. So as a church, how do we support each other in this? It's our aspirations that one day our children will choose God for themselves and see Jesus and God and the Christian life to be attractive, and how living in the world without a relationship with God and the belief in Jesus can be detrimental. How can we paint the picture that living for God is not just for ourselves, and for ourselves is the best decision that they can make with their lives? I could force my children to pray, study the Bible. I could force Oliver or Jude to get baptized. I could make them do it. Maybe because of the fear of how it looks to the wider congregation, I would really be on it and forceful that they've got to do it. But would that decision really be based on their realization of their need for God? Or the understanding of God's character and love for them? What we want is not just for our children to become Christians and make one decision, which is where it starts, but we want our children to want a Christian life above all else for the rest of their lives, come what may. To be followers of Jesus. To have a healthy marriage. To one day become parents. We want them to honour God with their lives throughout the rest of their life. It's not about just getting them baptised. It's about helping them to live and walk a Christian life. You know, Jesus enables us. He says, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. We cannot become Christians by ourselves. We all study the Bible with somebody else. We couldn't do it for ourselves. It took the love and kindness of somebody else, maybe in this room, to enable us to find God. It took somebody else to dunk us under the water. It took witnesses to see that we made a confession that Jesus was Lord. But once we begin to understand, and we've been taught a little bit, we can then help ourselves. We can build convictions of our own rather than relying on everyone. We begin to rely on God, but we still need help. So how can we do that as a church? How can we get to the stage where we're helping our kids to enable themselves and not over-help, so then they build conviction? I think that's a really important point. Otherwise it's spoon-fed. They need to develop it for themselves. We don't just want to baptise our kids and then... That's not helping. And also, it can become a burden. Our children shouldn't become a burden to us later in life. No, in Galatians it says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. We need to enable our children to take spiritual responsibility for themselves. And in Galatians it says, for each should carry their own load. But more importantly, how do we inspire our kids to do that? So what I want to do now is I want to split up into 3 groups. If I could ask you guys, from the ages of 2 to 5 years old, that's wrong, I have a typo, what's important for them to know about God between 2 and 5? Or 6 months?
We went through a number of points. I think we felt it's really important that they are loved.
Yeah.
That we love them. And also for us to make time that we're going to spend time with them. And also more or less engage them constructively. Because we feel like if you do not start engaging and spending time with them to actually know what their challenges are, they're like a broken Lego now. You know, how much so they will actually relate to you when they're much older with bigger issues in their lives. Whereas right now, you know, their sibling taking toys away from them wanting to eat, that's their main, issue. And finally, most important thing we thought is we need to start building relationship with our God with them.
Yeah.
In terms of start relating Bible stories and start separating facts from fiction. And making them realize that the Bible stories are very much real, so they can start making that reference and start developing that context. And on the final point, on how do we really shepherd them in terms of praise, discipline, and choices? As we all know, every child is different, and every parent, is different as well. We've all been brought up different ways, and so what works for some people might not necessarily work for others. So praise, it's everybody agreed that we should be, commending them when they've done something really right, well done. But at the same time, making sure it's not like, watered down that practically everything, clap your hands as for taking a step there. We feel that's not really productive. But praising them and acknowledging, things that they've done, we thought it was really good. I'm going to talk about choice. I'm going to leave discipline to the last, because that's a very...
We haven't solved that.
Yeah, we haven't solved that. But in terms of choices, we didn't, because they're still very much young at this age. So most of the choices that they're making, we are the one making it for them, literally, in all sense. So the choices that every parent is doing, it's all more or less revolving around their lifestyle. So discipline, that's a really tough one. So people count down, making them aware that there will be consequences to their action, like maybe threat of you might get spanked, or you need us to actually shout at you to stop you from doing what you're doing. And also in terms of this is about consistency in what we actually do to discipline them. Because if both parents are not in sync in how you intend to discipline the children, you might end up having the children actually playing off one another. So I think it's a very controversial area, I would say, because everyone, what works for us might not necessarily work for others, and everyone has different priorities, and that they really like their children to be more disciplined around. So, would you like to have as well? Yeah. So that's from us, 2 to 5.
That's great.
Any advice? Much appreciated.
Yeah. What I try and get out of this as well is what is important for them to know about right now in terms of God and Jesus, and that our discipline has to be consistent because God's consistent. It doesn't budge for anyone, if that makes sense. So we need to reflect God in that. We reflect God's discipline, but also reflect. The thing we forget about discipline is we miss out the end part, which is the reassurance and that forgiveness again. That reassurance that we still love them, that they're not in and out of our favour depending on if they're good or bad. They're always loved, if that makes sense. So it's being mindful that we're reflecting God's character through our parenting, and that we can talk about God being loving and assuring, and we're never out of favour of God. You'll always be loved, if that makes sense. So at a very young age, you need to understand that solid foundation, if that makes sense. Yeah. And then, you guys, 5 to 10?
we felt like sort of the basic sort of foundation of what's important right now in terms of biblical knowledge and things like that. I think, like with some of the older ones, they'll come up with questions. I'm not feeling like you have to answer everything, but just to be able to sort of maybe look into things with them and involve them a bit, I think is important. I know William certainly comes out with some questions, and I don't know what some of the answers are. And so like, over to you, Neil. But so I think it's sort of not feeling fearful that you have to answer all the time, but that you can actually, it can help their relationship grow in terms of their relationship with God as well. If you sort of do it together as well and sort of research it together.
Yeah. So exploring together.
Yeah. Shepherd in terms of praise, discipline, choices. Well, it's been a week of discipline in our house. I think praise is really important to encourage them to sort of see that praise and choices kind of go along together, don't they, really? Because how are you to make choices if you don't know what the right choices are, and if you've not been told, that's a really good decision. That's a really good choice you've made there. I know in our children's school, they always talk about making good choices. And they talk about it quite openly in the school, like, oh, well done, you've made a good choice sitting still, that's a good choice, So it's kind of quite helpful because you can kind of implement that at home as well. Discipline. Children learn from a very early stage what yes and no is. And I think even as babies, they know what no means. And it's, as Tim said, I think it's very individual to each child. We have 2 very different children in our household, and so discipline has to be different for both of them. And but there are consequences to actions that they may make or things that they may say, and they need to understand that. But they also need to understand we too have the same thing with us, and that if we get it wrong, we have to apologise to them. And I think that's really important for them to see that, because then they realise, oh, you two, you know, you're fallible as well, and you know, it doesn't mean that we're not loved and we're not forgiven, as you were saying earlier, and things like that. And that's a really big thing for children.
Yeah, affirmation, that reassurance the children need. Yeah.
From the teams, because I did the teams before we talked about it. From the team, there's kind of three things which felt there was no right now. One is having boundaries, the responsibilities and expectations of them within the family, within the wider family. And obviously got to be thought through first what those are, so they can be clearly articulated and help them understand that, because that then means that they can work with those and discuss those boundaries with you, rather than actually try to lay down the law as we would do when they're very, very young, when they wouldn't be able to understand. The next thing was integrity. Helping them to understand they need to develop their own standard. This is who they are. So when you think of, if, for example, you went to, let's say, Oliver's school, went to the school, said, right, Oliver Makinson, tell me about him. What would people say? Who is Oliver Makinson? You know, in school, there are, almost everybody has some sort of faith. All the children have some sort of faith. Many just don't know it yet. I mean, in many schools, the biggest number would be those that have no belief in faith. They have no faith. They have there's sort of children growing up to be atheists, whereby to be an atheist you've got to have more faith than anybody could possibly have. You to believe there's nothing. It takes the hugest leap of faith possible. So these teenagers that profess there's nothing really. It's not that they believe there's nothing. They just haven't discovered it yet.
Yeah.
But Muslim children will be clearly demonstrating as being Muslim. Sikh children will be clearly demonstrating being Sikh. Christian children need to clearly demonstrate and be Christian. It's who you are. But over all of that, one thing they must always know is that they're totally loved and accepted, whatever happens in their lives, whatever they do. Always loved, always accepted. Love is not usual to say as God love for us, it's unconditional. Always loved and accepted by us. With regard to discipline, praise, etc., one of the things that's been raised is communication is key. So communicating with them on an equal level, not as much as a parent, but to communicate and discuss things. Making time to discuss with each one-on-ones. Spending time where they know you've devoted this time to just being there to discuss with them about how things are going for them, whether or not they've got anything to discuss. But the timing of a lot of that communication has got to be different for different children. Each person is different, and so some will want to discuss stuff straight away, others will want to think about it and discuss it later. But we need to make it easy for our teams and pre-teens to be able to deliver us bad news. Because we might rather hear the bad news than you hold it inside.
Good point.
When things are going wrong in your life or there's things that are going bad, parents will instinctively know there's something going wrong and going bad.
Yep.
And so...
Like a sonar.
But creating an environment where they know they can just deliver bad news, whatever it is, they're still loved, still accepted, etc., and then we can work together. And finding areas to praise. Praise for helping out, praise for cleaning their own room, praise for staying out of trouble at school. Every day is a challenge.
Yeah.
You know, praise for getting through that challenge. So
cool.
there was lots of contribution on our group.
And thanks, Barry. Thanks, guys. And got the teens, What time is it now?
It's nearly 5:02, so we need to wrap up fairly soon. That's all.
I've got another slide as well to go, so briefly, a minute.
Dad just said to discuss what motivates us, what demotivates us. And we took into the example of the team camp, and we thought what motivates us, the team camp, what demotivates us. And we said what motivates us is like being around your friends all the time. There's that constant vibe of like being around people that are there for the same reason as you, and you're there to kind of like find out like almost your identity, for instance, and things like that. But we also said what demotivates us is the waking up early. we're expected to have our like flat chat and things like that, and that could end sometimes at 11:30, 12 o'clock, and then it's rise and shine 6 in the morning, and then breakfast starts at 6:30, and then after that...
Why are you smiling then if you don't like it?
I'm hoping that someone might mention this and we won't mind.
Cool.
And then we weren't too sure about the American team camp on Ben's place. The food was quite good there. But for me and Oliver, and I'm sure for a lot of the English teams in England and whatnot, we'll know that the food is actually great at the English one. And that would be a struggle for teams, we're growing and whatnot. And that can demotivate us. We've got go straight to a lesson, and sometimes it's slacking a bit, but yeah, but that's the thing.
You're just going to deliver a menu next time.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on then, because we've not got much time. It's 5 to 12. So we talked a little bit there about our experiences individually, but it all comes down to be on the same page and creating the same culture, creating a culture in the church, what's going to be a great environment for our children to one day become Christians. I'm going to skip this slide because that was Joe's thoughts, and I thought I really had to ask Joe what he thought of his thoughts into this today's talk, because Joe to me is an amazing example of someone who absolutely loves the kids and is committed, which I'm going to share about in a minute. And he sent me some thoughts back. Maybe ask Joe rather than we'll talk about it now. So the church should be a safe place, but it loved and accepted no matter what. It should be a fun place. Our church should be a spiritual place where we are all special to God, where we provide a place of worship for the children, where Jesus is King and miraculous, and the Bible is the authority in all our lives. Where we have good peer relationships. We want our children to have good, strong friendships in church. It's really important, because later on in life, they can pull them back. And also, again, Joe here, good adult-child relationships. Joe is a great example of this. He knows every child so well. And they know that he's committed to them. And when children know that we're committed to them, it makes a world of difference. I just want to get Becky to share quickly. Have I got time?
No, I think I'll share with people in fellowship.
Are you sure? Okay. Becky was going to share a story about something that happened at school recently, but come on, just share it quickly. Come on, share. We have got.
Right,
we've got 5 minutes over. It's not a big problem, is it?
Okay, I'll try to be really brief. Okay, so just an example of a situation which was not to do with church, but in school, of a little girl who I was working with, and she was extremely quiet, wouldn't even say what she wanted for lunch when I called the dinner register. And in class, she could have become one of those children that was quite easily overlooked. And so she was in our very low ability group, and I decided to pinpoint her and kind of come alongside her a bit. And the more I did that, the more I really grew to like her. And up until that, I didn't know her because she was so quiet, so it was difficult to like her because I didn't know her. And then the more I liked her and the more I got to know her, the more she really blossomed and opened up and became very teachable. And she's, thankfully, it's not just my doing, it's all the other teachers that are in her life as well, but she has made some remarkable progress. But it's because somebody had taken the time with her, they'd got to know her, so they'd been able to like her. She knew that she was liked, and it helped to create a very teachable heart in her, whereas before she'd been very introverted and easily overlooked.
So I think that was really important to share. It's an example from school, but what I was going to try and get across is that children know. They see if we like them or not, and that has a massive difference on whether they listen and learn about whether it's godly stuff or not. We have to like and get to know our children and be committed to them that they are, because then they'll learn and they'll respond. A child isn't going to respond in an environment where they don't feel liked and loved. That's the point I'm trying to make. So loving the kids as unconditional as we possibly can. Not a daisy petal, he loves me not kind of culture, but they're always loved, if they're naughty or not, and that we're committed to them. That's really important as a culture in the church. Reflecting God. That we too are sinners. A culture that we too aren't perfect. As teachers in Kids Kingdom or as parents, we're not perfect. One of the most powerful things as the kids get older, as they become teens, is I share my past. They don't know what I was like before I was a Christian, but sharing the fact that I was like this and like that before I became a Christian, is really powerful. We forget we've been in their lives as Christians. They don't know what it was like before we were Christians. So as they get older, sharing that culture of we're all in the same boat together, guys. We're all sinners. This is what I was like, and that's powerful. That's a culture we're trying to create, not an us and them mentality, but we're all in this together and being committed to the kids. That makes us approachable. When we're like that, we're approachable as parents, as elder people are approachable for them to come, like Barry was saying, deliver bad news, ask questions. That's the culture we're trying to create as a church. And it drives out fear. Perfect love drives out fear. We don't want fearful children in the world when they go about our lives. We want confident children. They want us to be confident with us as well. And to finish off, in Luke it says, "Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom." He's given all of us his kingdom. It's for us and for our children, and he's pleased to give it to us. Let's be pleased to show our kids that God has given us his kingdom. Amen.
Leave a comment wherever you see or hear this recording. Take care and God bless.